So Kartik, one thing I didn't ask you is where do you folks stand with your cloud migration process?
Yeah, thank you. So we've consciously adopted a cloud-first mentality for any new product development. So anything that requires scale and security, which is pretty much everything that we do, our architecture team has been pretty extraordinary in being forward-thinking and pragmatic in thinking about how to approach our architecture and design with the cloud. It's not just the new initiatives, right? It's also how all of our new platforms cohabit in the entirety of our ecosystem with our legacy stack. I mean, most carriers, most companies, unless you're born digital, have the anvil of the legacy systems that we need to carry. But no, I think our architecture team is doing all the right things, adopting a cloud-first mentality. We haven't necessarily explored multiple providers, multiple cloud providers. We are a Microsoft shop, so we gravitate towards our affinity and bias is towards Azure, not just for infrastructure in the cloud, but platform as a service, right? So all of the things that we're doing, our architects are also looking at Docker and Kubernetes from an orchestration perspective. Yeah, no, I think we're very much on our journey in being a cloud first organization.
Excellent. And what are you hearing from your member organizations?
Yeah, it's been fascinating, and definitely we'll talk about it as we get through the hour. What's been fascinating to me to look upon the totality of the industry. I mean, let's be honest. No one's accused the insurance industry in totality to be on the bleeding edge of adopting technology, and I think property and casualty has been a little bit farther along because you have a lot more interaction with your end users, right? From a consumer standpoint. Life and annuities has been a little bit behind, but I give us as an industry lots of credit. I think lots of individuals, lots of really smart CIOs, um, several years ago consciously adopted that cloud first, mobile first mentality and have truly doubled down on it, right? And I think those that have been successful are seeing the rewards and dividends pay off now, especially with all of the disruption that has happened due to COVID. Especially true with some of the large multi-line, multinational carriers, right? So people who have significant presence offshore. I think just having that cloud-first mentality has paid off, and it's not just infrastructure in the cloud, but applications in the cloud and everything that it takes in their organizations to support it. So we'll talk about it in a little bit, right? Things and programs that were considered strategic a few years ago are, table stakes today. So yeah, I think pretty mature in their journey.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, we are a few minutes past 1 o'clock, so I think we should go ahead and get started. You guys ready? Thanks. Thank you to all the attendees for taking time out of your day to be here with us. We have a great turnout. My name is Diana Getman. I'm the president of Ascendle, and I'll be your moderator today. We're excited to share today's topic in our webinar series, How to Effectively Move to the Cloud, Balancing the Strategic with Pragmatic, with presenters Dave Todaro of Ascendle and our guest speaker, Kartik Sakhaval of Limra Loma LL Global. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that we will be running a live Q&A towards the end of the webinar. We've enabled the Q&A feature, which is located in your Zoom controls on your screen. Feel free to submit questions at any time during the presentation. You can also click on the like button to upvote your favorite ones. If you miss anything in today's presentation, don't worry, we will email you a link to this webinar's recording along with the slide deck. So let me just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about Ascendle. For those of you who don't know us, Ascendle is a leader in custom software development. We partner with companies as their full service development team to create mobile and web applications to drive their business goals. We offer web, app, and platform development along with product strategy, product design, and agile consulting services. Here are just a few of our clients. As you can see, we work with a wide variety from early stage startup to some of the largest companies in the world, including Limra of LL Global. And our founder, Dave, is a recognized expert in our field. He spent 2 years to capture everything we know about Agile development and published the 500-page Epic Guide to Agile in 2019. Now let me go ahead and introduce today's dynamic duo. Dave is the founder and CEO of Ascendle. Dave eats, sleeps, and breathes software. He thrives on using his more than 35 years of software development and agile experience to help our clients achieve results that drive growth and profitability. We are excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Kartik. Kartik graciously joins us to share his deep experience and knowledge as an enterprise IT leader. He is currently the Vice President and CIO of Limra Loma LL Global and a longtime client of Ascendle's. We think Kartik is a true superhero and we are thrilled to have him join us today. All right, I think it's time to move on to our presentation. Take it away, Dave.
Sounds good. Thank you, Di. And so first of all, thank all of you for showing up today and taking some time out of your busy day and taking some time out of your summer. And I also want to say thank you again to Kartik. Kartik is one of the smartest guys I know. I've known him now for 10 or 12 years, recognized expert, speaks at all kinds of different events. He was on the stage at TEDx here in Portsmouth in the seacoast of New Hampshire, and really gracious of him to spend some time with us today. So first, before we get into our topic, I kind of thought that we would look at, what is the state of the world as far as cloud goes. And so I did some digging and had been a little while since I had looked into, what are companies doing. So first of all, it's no surprise that, a lot of the companies in the world are using the cloud in some form or fashion, whether they're deploying their applications to the cloud or they're consuming cloud services, whether it be G Suite or Office 365, tapping into the cloud. The majority of companies are doing that. However, there's still a pretty big chunk here. Almost half of the companies surveyed still have applications on premise in private data centers. And you can see the progressive companies down here, about 25% said, yep, absolutely, we're moving 100% of our applications to the cloud in the next 12 months. And a few folks here, pretty well ahead of the curve, about 17% of them have, in fact, moved 100% of their apps to the cloud. As I've talked to different folks in the industry, including those folks that are living and breathing the cloud, they continue to say, look, there's a huge swath of companies that have not either started their migration to the cloud and certainly, nowhere near finishing. So we thought this would be a good topical talk to dive into today, and hopefully you guys will find it useful. So just a little bit of a lay of the land. The other thing I wanted to look at is, well, what is the current state of the various cloud vendors? There are, 5, 6, 7 major cloud vendors, but the top 3, the usual suspects, continue to be the leaders: AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. You can see here, this is a combination of currently using in dark blue here, in orange, experimenting, and planning to use. You can see, if you combine all 3 of those, AWS and Azure are neck and neck. So pretty safe bet being on one of those clouds, or in many cases, companies sort of spread the wealth, so to speak, and they're in multiple clouds. Google Cloud, a respectable showing down here, with over 70% of companies either using it today, experimenting, or planning on using. So we're going to talk about a few different models of moving to the cloud. And the first one, which is maybe fairly obvious, is software as a service. That's if I sign up for an application that's fully hosted in the cloud, fully managed by a vendor, and I just pay a subscription. It's the most popular way of signing up, and I guess you were not really buying software anymore, more renting it or signing up for a subscription. The next one is what's commonly called lift and shift, where you're taking an application and without making any sort of major changes, moving it to the cloud. And there's some advantages of that, which I'll talk about a little bit. And finally, getting the most bang for the buck, re-architecting or refactoring, or some degree of reworking the code. From one extreme, it's just making a few changes to make your application a little bit more cloud friendly to get some of the bigger bang for the buck. At the other extreme, it's completely rewriting your application to take full advantage of the cloud, and there might be some reasons why you'd want to do that. So just in the interest of laying the groundwork, this may be a review for many of you, but I just wanted to kind of get the high level idea of what these hosting models look like. So first of all, on premises, this is where you own and run everything. So you're running everything from the networking storage and the servers, maintaining the operating system, keeping up with those latest releases and maintenance updates, as well as running your application and managing your data and your runtime, et cetera. So you own and run everything. The next level is infrastructure as a service. And you see here that in the green, it's managed by a third-party vendor. Now, what's happening here is that they're managing the virtualization down through the storage and networking, internet connectivity, et cetera. The most typical way that this happens is via virtual machines. And this is usually what's supporting the lift and shift. There's some variations here, but this is sort of the core lift and shift MO, where you're taking your application off of servers that you're running on premises and you're moving it into someone else's virtual machine managed in the cloud for you. Next is platform as a service, and this is where things start to get interesting. This is really the sweet spot if you're an application developer as far as what you'd like to get to, because it gives you the biggest benefit in terms of having the vendor manage as much as they possibly can, and then you're still retaining control over your applications and data. So if you're a software company, this is sort of the gold standard of what you'd want to get to. The other benefit here is as you're using these cloud services, you're able to slice your consumption, so to speak, and just pay for what you need. Whereas with the virtual machine and lift and shift, you might be paying for more than you actually need because you're paying for that entire virtual machine, as opposed to just those slices of cloud services that you need to support the specific pieces of your application that's running in the cloud. And this is where refactoring, re-architecting, adjusting, usually there's some tweaks that you'll need to put into place to fully take advantage of this model. And then finally, as we talked about, the software as a service model, this is where Office 365, G Suite, they're running the whole thing. All I do is show up, set up my account, create my users, and start using the application or the platform, and everything is taken care of for me. In general, what you want to do is figure out how to move from left to right. So if you're in 100% on premises, you need to figure out, all right, how do I start moving in this direction? How do I start looking at lift and shift, which is going to start giving me some of those benefits? Are there applications that are a good target for taking advantage of platform as a service? Whether I'm refactoring existing applications, in some cases rewriting, or as Kartik mentioned when we were chatting at the beginning, net new development targeting the cloud. And is there anything I can just get off my plate entirely? If I'm running an Exchange data center, maybe I should look at moving to Office 365. Or if I'm running some other type of infrastructure, maybe I want to get that off my plate so I can focus my folks on really what's going to make me money. Running a web server or a mail server, probably not really what we want to be in the business of doing if we can get it off our plate. So just digging into these models a little bit, some of the benefits and drawbacks. When we get into SaaS, like I said, we don't have to do anything. Everyone's pretty familiar with this model. I don't need to provision any resources. I don't need to buy any physical servers. I don't need to provision any virtual servers. And it's scalable. If I keep adding users, I'm probably going to pay a little bit more as I add users with my subscription, but I don't worry about scaling. It's just going to work. I trust my SaaS vendor that they have the right infrastructure in place. Now, on the drawbacks, it's possible that maybe it doesn't completely satisfy some legal and compliance requirements. I think that's becoming less and less the case, particularly as SaaS providers get the required certification. You know, certainly the biggest of the biggest SaaS providers have covered all those bases in terms of the legal and compliance, but there may still be a few things that you might not be able to move to the cloud. And if you're a control freak, you're going to have to let go a little bit because you're now going to be beholden to the SaaS vendor. They're going to build and maintain the product the way that they want it and continue to run it, but huge trade-offs as far as cost savings. The next level, looking at lift and shift, Again, this is where we're taking something that's currently running on an on-premise server, typically a virtual server, and moving it to a virtual server that's now hosted in the cloud by someone else. It's usually pretty simple. I don't need to restructure the application. I might need to make a few little tweaks as I move it into the cloud, but usually it's just, as the name implies, I'm going to lift it from here, shift it over, and just drop it into the cloud. And usually it's going to require a lot less time because I don't have to do all that work. Now, some drawbacks: I'm really not getting those native cloud benefits. I'm still saddled with a full virtual machine and all that comes with it. I have a little bit of increase in terms of flexibility and scalability. And the other drawback is it's going to be a higher long-term cost. Again, I'm paying for that whole virtual machine. Most applications don't need a whole virtual machine. They need different pieces of what that virtual machine is providing. But I have no choice. I'm paying for that black box, and I need to pay for the whole thing. And it's I get the whole thing or I get nothing. With re-architecting, now we're tapping into those cloud services, and I'm going to get a lot more scalability and flexibility. And I'm also going to get the long-term cost benefit. Again, I'm just paying for what I need. If I have a really heavy need for data, but not a really heavy need for computing, then I can pay appropriately. So I can pay for the data and pay less for the computing, or vice versa. I may have a really sort of heavy workload on the compute side, but not a lot of data storage requirement. And I can just pay for those pieces I need. There may be very specific services I need, and I can just pay for those. Maybe I need to send emails from my application. Maybe I need to do some large data sets, and I can pay for that sort of big data capability. And so those are the benefits. On the drawbacks, it is going to be more resource intensive. At the extreme, rewriting an application, if it looks like refactoring it, is just going to be this huge nightmare. Or in many cases, what you may look at is your application and say, you know what, this application is 15 years old. As it turns out, 80% of these features are never used. So we might look at re-architecting or rebuilding that application, just building that 20%, reimagining it because maybe the UI is a little bit tired, maybe the user workflows are a little bit not matching what we now understand our customers to need. And I'm going to go ahead and rebuild that. Now, the drawback, it's going to require some time to do that. Now, you can take a minimum viable product approach and build just a small piece of that and get a toehold into the cloud and then expand it over time. But at the end of the day, even if you are rebuilding that 20%, it's going to take some time to do that. And there is going to be some short-term expense. So the effort to do that re-architecting, refactoring, and or rewriting, it's going to be an upfront expense. But again, the long-term benefit, you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. So let me shift gears here. I'm going to hand the mic over to Kartik, and he's going to run us through some of the high-level business benefits from his CIO perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. You folks can hear me okay? Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. So a couple of things before we talk about the benefits of the cloud. I do want to reciprocate and say, without the shadow of a doubt, Dave Todaro is one of the smartest people I know. I had the pleasure of meeting Dave for the first time in 2007, Dave. The reason why I sit up and take notice when Dave speaks and talks about technology, and I used to call him the agile hipster because he was doing it before it was cool. When we talked in 2007, Dave, I think the industry, multiple industries, I was in telecoms at the time, were exploring moving from waterfall to agile. Most were doing some sort of a hybrid agile model, and Dave was all in with agile. And now I think the dynamic has shifted, right? I think you'd be hard pressed to find individuals who really double down on waterfall as a methodology. The second thing I would add from an Ascendle point of view, if you think about where we are today, right, in a pandemic universe where people who can work from home, work virtually, have virtualized, and that virtualization was done in short order. And industries and leaders in those industries who had historically been reticent on remote work or virtual workers. Like I've always had virtual teams and people working remote all across the globe. And again, I think we're aligned on this. Like we don't really care where you are as long as you're productive. The cloud obviously enables that to a significant degree. But I go back to Ascendle as an organization was born virtual, and you've always maintained that virtual presence. So the lessons you've been able to draw on over the past many, many years, I think are invaluable today, Dave. So I do want to make sure that, like, anytime Dave said, is talking about something, it is something of value and extremely meaningful. I think you're like Ray Kurzweil in that respect. Um, so let's talk about the benefits of the cloud, out of which there are many, right? Anybody would be hard pressed to talk about a top four or top five. But these are some of the things that I noodled on. Number one is increased security, right? Especially if you think about where we are today. Everybody's virtual. People are at home. It's easy to get distracted. Kids, dogs and kids. It's easy to compromise your computer systems as well as the systems of your companies if you're not careful, right? Especially when you have data residing on people's desktop. You put something on your home printer that shows up in your recycling, and lo and behold, you potentially lost custody of your corporate data. The thing with the cloud, from a security point of view and from a CIO perspective, think about the application inventory and the footprint that your company manages, right? So if you have data centers on-prem, and it's compounded by the number of applications that you have. So us as an association, we're over 100 years old, right? We are the oldest and largest trade association for insurance on the planet, between LIMRA and LOMA, two associations that merged in 2009. We have 200 years worth of industry knowledge, institutional industry knowledge, right? But with that legacy, with that rich history, also comes the development of these systems, and systems grow organically, and then organic growth becomes legacy at some point in the future. So the challenge with that is the surface area that you have to manage, right? So with an association our size, we oversee over 150 platforms. I think the precise number is about 165 or so. And that's a lot of surface area for us to keep tabs on and manage and watch over. But imagine that problem compounded 10, 100-fold in some of the Fortune 100 companies that we serve, right? So the surface area is much, much, much larger. Having to have your information security personnel keep their eye out on that broad vista is pretty challenging. Which is where the cloud comes in, right? It's a really, really attractive option for us to look at protecting one pipe, your pipe to your corporation to the cloud, and then back down, and let the big players who have invested tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in making sure that their security is robust, manage your cybersecurity, manage your data, manage your assets, manage your digital assets. So that's number one. I like to draw the analogy to Lego bricks, right? So if you have kids, or if you yourself have ever been a child and played with Legos, if you scatter Legos through a room, inevitably you're going to step on a Lego brick. And I can speak from personal experience. It's highly unpleasant to do so, right? To me, the cloud is just an assembly and organization of those Lego bricks into one neat package. Let's be honest. It's much harder to step on a Lego pyramid or a Lego structure than it is on these disparate Lego bricks, right? And I think you said that earlier, Dave. If I can pay someone else to worry about things that I don't have to worry about, I think that's an investment that's really worthwhile. The second nascent benefit is data protection and data modernization. Let's be honest. Everybody talks about data is the new oil. But data has always been the oil. I think we just now savvy to the point where we can go, hey, you know what? It's not just scattered, disparate data all across the ecosystem. There's something truly meaningful that we can do with it, right? You and I talked about out in the industry across multiple sectors. Everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence, right? But if you peel back that layer, if you think about AI as the tip of the iceberg, Below the waterline is the data that's required to placate it and the sheer computational energy it's required to bring all this data together, massage it, and surface anything meaningful in terms of insights. So for you to achieve that scale, to be able to do AI effectively or bring all these disparate data elements together, you need the sheer computational power that comes with the cloud. Um, from a protection point of view, if you think about data encryption, the cloud providers can help you manage that disaster recovery. I mean, if you think about where we are with the pandemic in March, where everybody virtualized and everybody started executing on their BCP plans, disaster recovery is something that most organizations had to manage themselves, right? You need to have multiple data centers. I was part of a large Fortune 100 once, and we had 3 data centers, right, surgically located through the continental United States. But that's a lot of things to manage. You need to make sure that there is high availability. You need to make sure that there is automatic failover. It's a lot, right? The cloud does all of that for you. So you, as a provider, as a technology service provider, can worry about your customers, both internal and external, and not have to worry about high availability or disaster recovery. Storage, I think one of the examples I cited, if you're a property and casualty insurer, and if you're doing, say, climatic weather pattern analysis, right, climatic models to try and figure out if you start underwriting policies in the coast of Florida in 2050, that's a lot of data that you need to ingest and manage. And not just ingest, but you need to store it somewhere, right? You're talking about terabytes, petabytes of data. You cannot effectively do that at any level of reasonable cost locally, and then have to manage the high availability and disaster recovery of it. Even crunching those data sets to provide actuaries or forecasters with those models and dashboards, I think you need the computational power of the cloud. One of the other things I will add on this front is data privacy and regulation. So if you think about where we are today as a society, you've got Castle that manages data privacy and regulation in Canada. You've got the California regulation. You got New York. You got Vermont. You got like multiple states trying to engage by themselves. And if you're a multinational carrier, you have to worry about GDPR, which is extremely rigorous, right? The challenge with that is, imagine a scenario where you're talking to people in Europe and GDPR kicks in, and you need to go through all of your systems, all of your databases on-prem, hunt and peck and eradicate any of the data sets that have to be in compliance with GDPR. It's a veritable nightmare, right? Rather than do that, having this data reside in the cloud just gives you the ability to do one and done effectively and making light of it, but much better than having to hunt and peck and do the whack-a-mole approach. It would be even more meaningful at some point. We're probably going to have federal regulation around data privacy and protection. I think it's inevitable. And having your data reside in the cloud, or at least part of your data reside in the cloud, you're going to make your lives a lot better. The number 3 thing I would add is around cost, right? And cost is an interesting thing. Because most organizations, right, if you're a small to mid-sized business, when you look at the sticker price, and we ran with this ourselves, right? Like when you look at the sticker on the price of entry for Azure or AWS, Google Cloud, Cloudera, what have you, it seems pretty prohibitive at first, right? But that's the green dollars. That's people think about it as a cost and not necessarily as an investment. Think about all the white dollar savings that are associated with you thinking cloud first. Management of the data centers, provisioning of the equipment, installing the equipment, maintaining that equipment, security patches of that equipment, paying the human beings who have to manage that. And now people think about human beings to manage data centers and, oh, are these people going to get displaced? They're not. They're just going to get retrained to manage your footprint in the cloud, right? But you can find efficiencies there itself. The power and the lighting and all of the UPS generators and all the backup locations, it's a lot. So if you aggregate all of those white dollar savings, the stuff below the waterline, the cloud might actually be a compelling cost benefit for you. And at some point, right, even if it's a little bit higher at the outset, I promise you, at some point, it's going to change where it's actually more cost effective for you to ply your craft in the cloud than it is to on-prem. Last but not least is operational efficiencies, right? So if you ever managed a data center or had teams interacting with infrastructure, it's a lot to do, right? You need to coordinate deployments. You need to, it's like the nuclear codes, right? You turn the left key, I turn the right key. Has to happen off hours, so you're not interrupting your business. Patches, maintenance, security patches. That's a lot to manage. And that's not even adding value to your customers, right? So if you think about delivery of new functions, functionality and features, if you need to install something that's moving at the pace of software as a service, it's implausible that you can keep up with weekly patches if you have something on-prem. And if you think about something like Power BI, right, which is Microsoft Azure's business intelligence engine for dashboards, I think they release a new feature set. It feels like every couple of weeks, right? If your business partners, if your customers internally clamor for that functionality, you're going to be doing like weekly or bi-weekly upgrades till the cows come home, and every regression testing that has to go with it, right? It's unlikely you're going to be able to do that effectively. So the operational efficiencies are pretty significant. The one thing I would add here is think about it from an agile prism, right? So you've got your scrum teams, everybody's moving 100 miles an hour, you got solid sprint velocity, you've got solid cadence, and you've got a product that's ready, what do you call it, Dave? A potentially shippable increment, and then boom, you hit that wall. You hit that wall because you can't deploy, right? You have to deploy off hours. You have to make sure you're in compliance with your deployment windows. And then people go, hey, you know what? We should do DevOps. We should do DevSecOps. We should implement the CI/CD pipeline. That's all great, but that doesn't necessarily solve the totality of your equation unless you're deploying it directly into the cloud, right? I think it's just much more effective having that end-to-end pipeline set up. Just my 2 cents. Dave, if you could flip to the next slide, thank you. So let's talk about the strategic being pragmatic, right? I think we alluded to in our banter at the start, Dave. If you think about our industry, financial services, holistically, 5 to 10 years ago, the cloud was this mythical beast, right? It was like a unicorn. Do we put our data there? What do you mean we're going to lose custody of our data? We've come a long way. And I think organizations that were proactive in thinking about cloud first have certainly fared much better during these pandemic times than those who haven't. And this is just not in America, right? This is a global phenomena. And we've vacillated as an industry, right? Do we go with the cloud, or in a nutshell, the way to describe this to the C-suite from a business perspective is cloud is effectively somebody else's computer, right? They're managing the care, feed, security, maintenance for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You can worry about delivering business value. But what I mean by the strategic being pragmatic, and we'll talk about in a second. Think about disasters that we have in New England, right? Weather-related disasters. So you have a nor'easter that hits New Hampshire, hits Massachusetts. You've got a sliver of your population working from home. The kids are home, but they all have snow days, so they're out there, playing in the snow. At no point in our history have we been able to have such an unprecedented rate of virtualization, where multiple people in the household are working from home, right? They're using the internet. The kids are doing online school, if not playing Xbox Live or streaming Netflix or Disney Plus or the 17 million other streaming services that we have available. The challenge with that is bandwidth, right? So honestly, I was holding my breath in March. I'm like, is our national infrastructure going to hold up to the stressors that we've never stress tested it at this level before? And it did. And it did primarily because of the simple reason that most of the ISPs and the telcos and the service providers made a conscious investment many years ago to adopt a cloud-first mindset. I was preparing another slide deck for something else entirely. You realize it was only like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago that Netflix was in the Americas, and not in all of the Americas and parts of Europe, right? So that was like 2014, 2015, right? 2020, Netflix is available throughout the globe, regardless of where on the planet you are. You can get a customized regional experience, except in China, right? And that's primarily because they have built their entire infrastructure on AWS, on the AWS cloud. So they're piggybacking on AWS's infrastructure globally. And I think they rank top 3 in terms of performance. You're still going to get a high quality video service, regardless of where you are. I think YouTube does the same thing, obviously on the Google cloud. So the strategic, when I say the strategic is pragmatic, people who made conscious investments in this platform many years ago are seeing the rewards pay off now, because most of these infrastructure providers have been operating in the cloud. So that brings me to my next point. So 5 to 7 years ago, as we had an inflection point, an existential crisis amongst ourselves, right? Do we go all in, whole hog in the cloud or not? I think people have realized the cloud is now table stakes, right? And will continue to be table stakes. So I define us in this technological age, in the age of the pandemic, in 3 eras, just my mind. The now normal today is a period from March 2020 and probably, you know, in Q1 2021, presuming there's a vaccine, there's some level of normalcy restored. The new normal is a period that starts in March, also started in March 2020, and stretches us into that 3-year horizon to Q4 of 2023. And the last is the next normal, which starts in Q1 of 2024. And the reason I identify these things is because we're hyper focused on the now normal and potentially the new normal as we're doing our budgets and our plans. But let's not lose sight on what's on the horizon from a next normal prism, right? So, you know, we're talking about artificial intelligence. I presume, making a prediction that artificial intelligence is going to continue augmenting itself and getting more and more effective as you can tap into the cloud compute capacity. Dave, I mentioned to you 2 days ago about quantum, right? So we're not necessarily talking about quantum computing, and it's probably not going to be a big thing until the latter part of the 20s, the roaring 20s. But imagine a scenario where quantum meets cloud, because you need the computational capacity, meets AI, right? So people's definition of AI can be variable, because people think it's like a bot or whatnot, right? And sure, maybe for today it is. But if you think about AI, you've got you know, humans solving human problems, right? Humans solving computer problems, computers solving human problems. To me, AI is defined by when computers can solve problems of other computers, right? And you're not going to be able to do that until you have the computational capacity of the cloud. And to me, that is going to be defined by the next normal. So what I'm saying is this is going to be extremely disruptive, regardless of what industry you serve in. And unless you start planning for it now in the prism of that next normal, it's going to be a tough road to hoe. So the cloud is table stakes and will continue to be so. Cloud at scale, it's literally a different kettle of fish, right? So, you know, if you think about what I just said about cloud being table stakes, and people are going to lose the table if they don't invest in it now, invest in it smartly now. Cloud at scale is either how you define your organization as scaling up, right? So you've invested in the cloud. Like us, you probably have a few applications of the cloud, and you continue adding to that stack. Scale out, which means you harness not just application stack, but as you described in your preceding slides, Dave, about using infrastructure, about using platform as a service, about thinking about re-architecting your legacy stack into a cloud-first mentality and mindset. But it requires a different way of thinking, and it's going to require us to all do differently. I think to me, moving to the cloud, agile, digital transformation in general is an inside-out phenomena, right? It's less about the technology. The technology is important, but it's more an innate cultural shift, right? It's about shifting our mind to pivot to thinking differently. And that cloud at scale requires that mindset. And the reason why I wanted to call attention to it is most organizations, large organizations, I think are like super large, like the Fortune 100s, are probably okay because they have massive budgets and they're investing significant amounts in their cloud strategies with resources or whatnot. I think this is where mid-sized businesses, and mid-sized, I mean like 5,000 to 10,000 people, right? And small businesses, anything below 5,000, would benefit from having some guidance, right? And by guidance, I don't mean like a bunch of consultants coming in and telling you how to do it. Like I mean shepherds, right? To me, you know, understanding my business, understand my problem before you articulate solutions to me. So your solution for me might be a hodgepodge, a combination of maybe the first 2 years you should scale up, the next 2 years you should scale out, or you might come and say, hey, you know what, your business model mandates that today you start doing everything in the cloud stack, or think about you know, diversifying your business, divesting, or doing something different, right? So that's the kind of consultative, you know, from my lens approach that I talk about, which, and I'm just not just saying that to polish your apple, but that's to me the inherent value of an organization like Ascendle, right? Because you're not looking at one industry, one company, one vertical. You're looking at multiple industries, multiple companies, multiple verticals, and bringing all of that knowledge to bear, and helping me personalize. So it's no longer a, I don't know, sandwich looking for a picnic. It's a customized thing for me, where you go, hey, you know what? I understand your problems, and here's a strategy to help you solve them, and help us with that journey. Small and large companies. So there's an interesting point about smaller and large companies. I do think all organizations, right, regardless of your size, are going to have a similar issue for what I described a couple of slides ago, where we're so hyper focused on the now normal and the next normal. I think moving on to the generation, right, after 2024 and beyond, is going to require a different way of thinking. In a nutshell, I think this transformational mindset needs to be shared equitably across smaller companies and larger companies, because no one's going to be impervious to it. Small companies will struggle with the cost, as I mentioned, the cost of entry, because it looks like a cost. But if you think about them as an investment and not necessarily as a cost, an investment over time, and look at it strategically, I think you'd be better off. It'll help you get over the green dollar sticker shock. And in closing, so just my closing thoughts, other considerations, right? Why might you want to invest and double down into cloud? One is to achieve global scale. I think that's a no-brainer. If I use the Netflix analogy, if you're looking to achieve global scale, or tell people you're achieved global scale, the cloud is a must-have. Number two, high availability, always on. If you're running commercial websites, e-com, if you're doing retail, you want to attract that shopper who's awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, adding to their shopping basket, right? You might realize, like, I think most people might agree, ever since this quarantine period, feels like every single day there's a new Amazon package showing up at my house, right? But that's the thing. It's because it's always on and always available. I think it's pretty critical. Business continuity, disaster recovery. I think everybody had robust business continuity plans, but no one planned for business continuity required at this scale. And I think the ones who have successfully pulled it off are the folks that have a sound cloud presence and cloud strategy. Last but not least, right? I mentioned if you haven't been an organization that's been born digital, like an Ascendle or a Tesla, I think everybody has the anvil of these legacy systems that we carry around like an anchor. And yeah, you can go multiple ways, right? Limra Loma, we're doing work with McKinsey and Company to guide the industry on which path to choose. But I think the answer needs to be, whether you're doing API overlays on top of your legacy systems, or if you're just replacing them with a COTS product, that has to be in the cloud. I think it's critical for you to not just think that you're upgrading in place, right? The analogy I use is it's not product evolution, it should be product revolution. Product evolution is building a better mousetrap, right? Product revolution is trying to figure out why you have mice in the first place. So I think looking at platform modernization from that lens is extremely beneficial.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kartik, for that big picture overview. And just to bring us home here, I'll talk about just a few ideas for, well, how do I do this? How do I go about moving to the cloud? And just some high level overview. In the middle of a thunderstorm here, you might hear the thunder in the background. So first is figuring out what to move, and then taking a look across the current environments and current technology. And then really the key critical idea here is to select some cloud partners. So that is really in two main categories. One is a systems integrator. Now this is someone who's going to understand the landscape of the cloud, be able to look at your technology, and really the biggest bang for the buck with them is probably going to be more on the lift and shift, where they're going to figure out how to take your current systems and move them to the cloud, either moving to a SaaS application, or just taking that application, lifting it off of your servers and placing it into cloud-hosted virtual servers. The other type of partner that's really important is a software development partner. Most companies, if they said, if the business leaders said, all right, we want to move to the cloud, we want to start with these applications, go. The development team would say, well, we've got all of this current work that's on our plate. We're already overbooked. How are we going to do this? So there's this one-time move for each application. Usually that's going to either outstrip your capacity or your know-how or both. So working with a solid software development partner that knows how to do that work and has deep experience in that is really going to help you move the needle. The next phase here is to do some planning, determining which cloud environments are we going to need, what do the virtual servers look like, what do the cloud services look like, what does the overall architecture look like, and then selecting a cloud vendor or vendors. Is it AWS? Is it Azure? Is it Google Cloud? Is it some combination of all of those? And then the third phase is actually execution. So getting down into now the step-by-step plan for the migration, forming a strategy, forming an execution plan, and a communication plan, which is super important. You don't want to pluck something from over here and drop it over here and not tell anybody. So internal communication as well as customer-facing communication is critical. And then the next is executing one step at a time. This is where you can use an agile approach, iterative and incremental. So it's going to wash, rinse, repeat. Just take a small bite, make sure that works. So you're going to set up the environment, do a trial migration, and then complete that transition, make sure it's all working, and then tackle the next one. If you have 165 applications like Kartik's company does, and they were all on premise, you probably don't want to try to move all 165 all at once. You probably want to pick one and start there, and then wash, rinse, repeat. So 5 things that you can start doing right now. So Kartik hit on this a couple of times, adopting an agile mindset, really these first 2. Adopting an agile mindset with IT and within IT. So making sure that we're taking that iterative and incremental approach, trying to avoid the big bang, which some companies can pull it off, and it's applicable in some cases. Most companies will do a much better job if they iterate. The next thing you can do right away is start any new development efforts in the cloud, particularly with CI/CD, that's continuous integration, which is automatically testing your application all the time, and continuous deployment, which is automatically, in a computerized way, moving into those cloud environments. So you really want to stop the bleeding. You don't want to dig the hole any deeper with your on-premises work. Another great low-hanging fruit, development and testing environments. We've worked with clients where it's taken them months and months to get new environments provisioned. Getting something provisioned in the cloud is dramatically easier. We can spin up a new development and test environment in about 6 minutes. Compare that to one of our big clients where they had outsourced IT. It would take them 8 months to get a new server in-house and all spun up and ready to go. Showcase environments where you're demonstrating your application. That's a great target for the cloud because, again, you can spin it up quickly, you can make it available, and you can pay for just what you need. And then looking at, well, what can we move that's currently self-hosted into either a cloud-hosted or even a SaaS model. You know, email server, that's a really good low-hanging fruit. Again, if you don't have any sort of restrictions around that, the major vendors, G Suite and Office 365, are going to handle just about every scenario you could throw at it. SharePoint, Confluence, your DevOps tools, finance or ERP, et cetera. You know, getting things off the plate of your IT group so that they can focus on the rest of the cloud migration. All right, so quick recap here, and I'll ask Kartik to throw his 2 cents in as well. We talked about how the cloud provides security, data protection, data modernization, cost savings, performance of IT operation, boosting all of those. We talked about the 3 major approaches: moving to a SaaS model, just offloading it, get it off your plate; lift and shift, where you're going to take it and drop it into the cloud without many changes; and re-architecting, refactoring, in some cases rewriting for the cloud. The next is, the point here was lift and shift is going to be the fastest, but re-architecting is going to give you that increased scalability, flexibility, and your longer term cost savings. And big picture steps: determining what to move, working with your partners, again, the systems integrator and the software development partners, and then executing in steps in that wash, rinse, repeat pattern. And a few ideas that I just threw out: adopting that agile mindset, starting the new development efforts in the cloud, and then getting into moving your existing applications along with those other ideas are super important. And working with the right partners, I think I can't say enough about that.
Yeah, Dave, can I pile on to that for a second?
Absolutely.
So I think I mentioned it earlier, right? To me, the value of an organization like Ascendle, I'm not just saying that because I'm here with you, right? I sincerely mean it. Is that you guys have demonstrated mastery and success in each of these pillars, from an architecture recommendation to guidance to implementation to embedding with your clients to successfully see that through. Um, I don't think you can understate that, right? I think you can't, like the power and the importance of having that advisor, the trusted advisor and the trusted partner is pretty phenomenal. It's pretty incredible. Like any vendor can sell you a solution, right? Like you can go out and like buy an AWS slice today or an Azure slice today, but no one can help you shepherd, through your implementation end to end.
Excellent. Thank you, Kartik.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kartik and Dave. It was a really informative presentation. We do have some great questions from the audience, so I want to dive right in. We have about 10 minutes left. If you haven't entered your question yet, go ahead. It's the Q&A tool. And if we don't get to your question, feel free to follow up with us on LinkedIn or via our website, and we'll be happy to spend time answering any and all questions that you have. All right, so the first one, I'll just throw the questions out, and Dave and Kartik, you can fight over who will answer each one. First one, how would I prioritize which applications to move?
I'm going to hand that one over to you, Kartik. That sounds like a business-focused question.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both, right? So choosing which applications to move. Dave, you alluded to it earlier. I think you need quick wins, right? You need quick wins for a few reasons. One, you need to demonstrate to the business the value that you derive from moving to the cloud. So you would start small, start with like Exchange or Outlook or something like that. Everybody's favorite is either SharePoint or Office 365. Some of the biggest bang you can get for your buck to demonstrate success with your business partners is pretty invaluable. And then if you think about a smart play from a building perspective is look at the requirements, right? So if the business comes to you and promotes an idea where they need scalability, high availability, disaster recovery, always on, needs to be accessible from everywhere, and it needs to be super, super duper secure, I think that's a no-brainer. You say, hey, you know what? Based on what you guys are saying, we recommend going into the cloud for these particular reasons. And then again, going back, I hate to beat a dead horse, but working with the right partner to be able to make that determination. If you're going to take a step back and map out the entire roadmap and your entire journey, or regardless of where in your journey you are, I think it's a pretty invaluable thing to do.
Great. All right, the next one. Do you think it's necessary to have a partner to move to the cloud? What are the advantages of using a partner versus an in-house team?
So Kartik kind of alluded to that one, and I'll just sort of underscore, as we've worked with our clients in terms of, primarily the re-architecting or the rewriting for the cloud, there is a tremendous amount of information that needs to be absorbed. So we've been doing this in a pretty hardcore way now for 2 or 3 years in all kinds of different contexts. And I would say just about every day we're learning yet another new little piece or twist or something, whether it has to do with microservices and scaling or networking and security. There's just so much to learn, and certainly your IT group could use a little bit of a hand, because again, we've been at it now in a really hardcore way for about 3 years in terms of just boots on the ground. I think I added up how much time we've spent so far with just a few clients, 30,000 hours, and we're still cranking along pretty fast.
Awesome. All right, the next one. If I only have so many dollars to invest in my company right now due to the economy, is moving to the cloud a smart investment?
What are your thoughts on that?
Rock, paper, scissors, Dave? You want me to take that one?
Sure.
So short answer, yes. And the longer answer is, look, funds are going to be always a challenge, right? Point to me a business owner, entrepreneur, manager, leader who says they have all the resources available at any given point in time, right? Not going to find that person. So the challenge is, yes, we look upon 2021. It's going to be a tough economic year. The economy is, not the best. Unemployment's high. People instinctively think about tightening belts. But I think this is the time where you make the smart investments to be able to sustain and pay you off in 2022 and 2023. Because at some point, the economy will recover. At some point, we're not going to be sequestered in our houses anymore, unless you're Ascendle, because you guys have it down to a science, right? But at some point, people will go back to physical locations, maybe not the same amount, and some portions of the world will virtualize. But unless you make those investments now, I think you're going to have a tougher road to hoe in 3 years. You can't plant a seed and expect to harvest the fruit tomorrow, right? It's going to take a little bit of time. You need to build that runway. So absolutely, I would argue yes, you should.
Great. Okay, the next one. Where do microservices fit into the move?
I can take that one. So microservices, if you're familiar with cloud technology, is a way to slice up your application into different pieces and have different small services or microservices handle specific pieces of that. And it gives you a lot of flexibility. It gives you a lot of scalability. Just like cloud services lets you scale and pay for just the different parts of the application you need, it's a similar idea with microservices. If there's a part of the application that needs more horsepower, I can scale that up. So it's I would say, a fairly advanced way to tackle the re-architecting and the refactoring for the cloud. I would also say be careful. If you don't have experience with microservices, you can pretty quickly get tied up in knots. One of our clients started down the path of building an application. They spec'd it out into a bunch of microservices and pretty quickly discovered that all of the communication between the 7 different microservices started to tie them up in knots. And usually what we advise is that start with the monolith, what's called the monolith, which is one application, and then figure out what pieces might make sense to be peeled off. The really easy ones to look at, even though it's not what a lot of people consider microservices, is if you're looking at needing to process big data or process real-time data like an Internet of Things, you can use those different cloud services essentially in a microservices type of approach. It might not be Docker and Kubernetes, which is usually what you think about when you think about microservices, but putting that computing challenge into the right box is a really good way to start. I would be pretty slow to take an application and break it into a bunch of pieces just because I want to get my hands dirty with microservices, because each additional piece that you add, you're going to add cost and complexity, from source code management to build automation to communicating between the microservices, security between the microservices, caching of data. It turns into a really big, nasty clump of yarn pretty quickly.
Great. Okay, let's see if we can get through a couple more. Is there a rule of thumb for picking which cloud to use?
I'll tackle that one and see if Kartik has any insight to add. I would say that if you're a Microsoft shop, like Kartik said, you're going to get a lot of value if you're going to use Azure. Now, AWS supports Microsoft, but they don't have the type of deep support out of the box that Microsoft does, where Microsoft's essentially taken all of their technology and cloud optimized it. And it's going to make it easy not only to lift and shift, which in a lift and shift scenario, it's probably not as much of a distinction. I can spin up a Windows virtual machine on AWS. I can spin up a Windows virtual machine on Azure. Where you're really going to get the benefit, in my opinion, is when you start getting into the cloud services, because SQL Azure, for example, is going to be optimized for your SQL Server workload, and it's going to allow you to bring that data to the cloud much more effectively. And it's much more transparent. The integration with the tooling, what we found, is one of the biggest benefits, where I'm in my development environment and I can very easily and transparently tie into the cloud. So I would say that if you're a Microsoft shop, I would take a hard look at Azure. If you're not using Microsoft technology, I would probably do a bake-off and see which services you want to use and see which might support those other services. But interested to see what Kartik might add to that.
No, I agree. I think it's where your natural affinity is, right? If you're a Microsoft shop, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck with Azure. I will say it's not that we are prohibited from exploration in AWS. We are doing some exploration of solutions in AWS. But I think it's 6 of one, half of the other. But again, that's where your affinity is. It's also a talent issue, right? So if you have individuals in your shop who gravitate towards your preferred stack, development stack, then I think that's it. That's an easier inflection point for you to make that decision.
And the other thing is there's nothing that prevents you from using multiple clouds. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
Pick the right tool for the right job. You might have some Microsoft stuff that might be a good fit for Azure. Some other stuff might be a good fit for AWS. Then you're mitigating a little bit of vendor lock-in. And but both clouds are going to support the contemporary technologies. Going back to microservices, both support Kubernetes and Docker and all of that sort of open source technology. And even the Microsoft technology that we use today is all open source.
Yep.
So it can really run anywhere. And believe it or not, the Microsoft code we write oftentimes is running on Linux because that's what Docker is using.
All right, we have come to the end of our time together. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you again, Dave and Kartik. It was really great to have you both. It was really informative.
Great, thank you, folks. Dave, thank you for all you do for the industry. Like I said, I think you folks at Ascendle provide incredible value. So thank you for that.
Thank you for coming today, Kartik, and joining us. And Kirk, we see your question there. We'll get back to you via email with your question. And appreciate everyone's time today. And have a fantastic day.
All right, bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.